Frieren Beyond Journey's End has a lot of visually stunning fights, one of which ended up trending on Twitter for a while. Obviously, well deserved. It's nice that the care put into this anime is being appreciated, but I do find it a shame that all the cool animations and badassery overshadowed one of my favorite fight scenes in the show. Barely anyone talks about this fight outside of the memes where Frieren orders Aura to do silly goofy things. It wasn't the flashiest, but the way it was directed and how all three different fights seamlessly tie together is so beautiful to me. In this video, I will calmly try to explain what makes this fight scene so damn good and why you should appreciate it more. We'll be talking about three different fight scenes, but because they're happening at roughly the same time, we'll treat it as one with little parts. We'll be peeling back three different layers of this battle: the narrative flow, fight choreography, and characterization. Let's start by talking about this crest. In order to tie the narrative flow between the fights, Frieren tells us a mini story symbolized by this item. The first time we see this is in the hands of Graf Granat. By following Fern and Stark sneak into his mansion, we realize that Graf Granat had been held captive by the demons in his own house. A quick summary of what happened thus far. Graf Granat and the demon peace envoys planned for a diplomatic solution to the ongoing battle with demons against humans. Graf Granat realized the demons didn't really want a truce, so he confronted them, and he lost. So now, the demons held him captive and plan on torturing him until he tells them how to lower the protective barrier in his town, which will then allow the demons to enter and destroy everything, which is why Stark sees him tied in a chair in his own house. Stark tries to set Graf Granat free, only to realize that the rope he was bound with was imbued with magic. The Graf notices Stark shaking and calls him valiant, just like his dead son who was also shaking prior to setting off to battle. After that, he tells Stark to grab the crest on his chest and tell his people to run away. Just through that small interaction, we can learn that the crest is used as a symbol for the Graf's family. By mirroring Stark's fear and courage with the Graf Granat's son, it's easier to empathize with him, especially later on when we're given more context about his death. After saving Graf Granat from the demons, he reveals why they couldn't defeat their leader, Aura. She is able to force people to obey her will through her skills. The anime gives us an example of Aura using this power. She uses it against a soldier who was wearing a crest just like Graf Granat's. This little detail tells us that the soldier was the Graf's late son who headed off to battle. Because Stark was used as a mirror for this character, it's easier for viewers to step into the soldier's shoes and be invested in the mini flashback, especially if you already like Stark. It's easier to understand Aura's overwhelming power and brutality if we can see Stark represented by the brave soldier who couldn't do anything against Aura despite having incredible willpower. All of this setup is tied up and concluded with the fights between Frieren and Aura. A crowd of headless armors attack Frieren under the command of Aura, one of which wears the same crest as Graf Granat. Instead of framing the tragedy of the soldiers' lost lives through a crowd of unrecognizable faces, Frieren focuses on one soldier. The prior context that was shared about Graf Granat's son makes the fight feel more personal. The more viewers cared about this soldier's story, the colder and more brutal Aura appeared in contrast. This will then set us up for a satisfying conclusion, Aura having a taste of her own medicine. But Frieren didn't just stop there. While the narrative forms its backbone, the dynamic fight choreography keeps our eyes glued to our screens. The first standoff we see is Fern versus Lugner. Lugner is more experienced, but the two are able to fight on equal footing because Fern fires up her spells quicker. An advantage she has because she knows fewer spells. She doesn't need to spend a split second to decide what spell she will use because she only knows basic offensive and defensive magic. Anyone from this fight can take the initiative. It's fast-paced, and one wrong move from either side means death. Meanwhile, the fight between Stark and Lini is a beatdown. The initiative of this battle clearly lies with Linny, at least at first. Stark is not only fighting this demon girl, he's also fighting his inner demons. The contrast between the two fights keeps it interesting for the viewers. Frieren breaks the pattern by visually showing the impact of the start of the fight with Lugner and Fern on Linny towards the second fight, while she laments that her fight was already over. Not only that, the tension from Stark and Linny's fight seeps through the fight between Fern and Lugner. Because the other fight was evenly matched slightly towards Fern's favor, the pressure lay with how long Stark is able to survive against Linny. Viewers root for him to keep standing up because the moment he doesn't, Linny would have the free time to join the fight between Fern and Lugner and tip the battle into the demon's favor. Lastly, unlike the previous battles, Frieren and Aura's fight does not engage in direct blows. The narrative symbolized by the crest showed us Aura's overwhelming ability. Her magic is called Scales of Obedience. It allows her to place two souls in the scales and waste their mana, and whoever has more is able to take absolute control over the other. If I were to make an analogy, this fight feels more like a life or death poker game. It is about tricking the opponent into thinking they have a better chance at winning. The tension in this battle comes from the mystery around Frieren's mana. Viewers to this point aren't aware of how much she actually has. We know she has a trick up her sleeve and she has more mana than she shows, but we don't know for sure if it will be enough to trick and beat Aura. Frieren lays out the foundation in front of us one by one, switches to Aura's perspective at the end to keep the mystery, indulges in that tension, reveals the mystery, and drops off that banger line to conclude the fight and kill off Aura the same way she did to thousands of human soldiers. As great as the story's ability to show us a captivating fight, what truly gave it depth was the characterization of the individuals involved. Going back to Fern versus Lugner, we can see how much trust Fern puts on Frieren's words. If Frieren says Fern and Stark aren't weaker than the demon peace and voice, she trusts that. If Frieren says she fires off her spells quicker, Fern is willing to bet on that with her life. When she took initiative to attack Lugner in a standstill, you'd think she has more experience fighting demons than she actually does. And lastly, we are finally able to see the advantages of her talent to conceal or suppress her mana. Similarly, the fight between Linny and Stark shows us a deeper look at not only Stark's abilities, but his mentality. Stark, as we know, does not have confidence in his strength. He may have gained some confidence from fighting against the dragon in the previous arc, but now he had to face a new form of his fear, fighting against his own master. I understand this fight was a little cliche. Stark gets hit, goes down, has a flashback, and then he's able to regain his strength and defeat his opponent. But I enjoyed that even if on the outside it's following a trope, what truly made it feel different is how connected his actions was to his character. Because he looked up to his master, it makes sense for Stark to freak out when fighting against an opponent with the same techniques as him. Starting from the first fight against the dragon, how he didn't think he could defeat it for 3 whole years until Frieren tricked him into defeating it himself, it makes sense for his character to misattribute Linny's strength. As foreshadowed by Linny's blow to Stark's eye that didn't blind him for some reason, we are shown that Linny's blows were not as heavy as Aizen's, who had caused a massive scar on his forehead, and therefore not as scary as Stark had thought. Not only does the fight against Linny reflect Stark's inability to accurately assess his strength compared to an opponent, it also showed us Stark's core fighting style inspired by his master, resilience. It doesn't matter how much you fall in the fight, the winner is simply the last person standing. Lastly, we see Stark's resolve. When he hits with his powerful attack, Stark was expecting mutual destruction from a trade blow by blow against Linny. From this, we as viewers understand that unlike what Stark thinks, he's reliable in dire times. Apologies for going off on Stark's characterization. Trust me, this section was way longer before I edited it, but if you want to hear me analyze Stark's lack of confidence more, check out this video I made a couple weeks ago. Back to this video. The fight and setup in the battle with Fern and Stark gives us all the elements we needed to know and understand the context of the fight between Frieren and Aura. We are given clues on how Frieren is able to win the fight against Aura indirectly. Aura acts as an interesting foil to Frieren. They're both long-lived creatures who can be brutal, cold, and don't understand human emotions. So what's the difference? Well, unlike Aura, Frieren is capable of empathy and doesn't solely act based on self-interest. An example of this is how Frieren uses her fighting style against Aura's controlled army. The first time she fought against her with the Heroes Party, Frieren blasted the armors left and right without a care about the damage they would take. In her eyes, they had ceased to be humans and had become part of Aura's way to attack her party. Himmel scolded Frieren from fighting this way, so in the next fight with Aura decades later, Frieren fought in a way that didn't damage the armors of the late soldiers. Aura didn't understand why Frieren would continue to act upon the words of Himmel when he had already passed away. The difference between Aura and Frieren is evident after this dialogue. Frieren may have trouble connecting and empathizing with humans due to her long and isolated lifespan, but she was still able to form connections and empathize with others. Aura is only shown to act with self-interest, not understanding why Frieren would still follow the words of a dead man who didn't have the capacity to keep her accountable. This fight is also used as a tool to understand Frieren's past. She learned her way of fighting from her master Flamma and the reason why the demons called her Frieren the Slayer. She dedicated most of her life, more than 1,000 years, to suppressing her mana just so she could trick and kill demons. Frieren revealing the capacity of her mana after Aura had placed her soul in the scale of obedience not only serves as a climax to this battle, but it also shows Frieren's dedication to practicing something considered useless just so she could eliminate demons more efficiently. It's incredible how much the story paid attention to and weaved together details from these three fights to create a smooth flow overall. Subtly incorporating an emotional narrative through the crust allows viewers to understand the gravity of lives lost in battle. The dynamic fight choreography keeps us hooked in watching the fights, while expanding on characterization of characters we already know and love keeps us interested in their next adventure. What other details did you notice about the fights that I missed in this video? Feel free to share in the comments. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.